Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. We are in the month of August, which means we are also in the month dedicated to reading books by women in translation. So in honor of that, I thought I'd sit down today and walk you through a few of my literally all-time favorite books written by women that have been translated into English. This is my stack of books, and I decided when I sat down that I wanted to be really particular about the books that I showed you. I didn't just want to show you anything that I've read that's been written by a woman and translated into English. I really wanted to show you books that were, despite being translated and fitting the prompt for this recommendations video, I would consider all of these books to be, if not favorite books of all time, then like really freaking close. So we'll start with this one, which is, I was gonna say arguably my favorite, but like I have a couple. Ooh, we'll get to them. I think there's 3 in this list that are like God tier favorite. This one is one of those. And this is called Les Femmes de Giles by Madeleine Bordeaux, translated by Faith Evans. And I believe this was translated from the French, if I am not mistaken. First published in 1937. And this is a really haunting and quiet book about this one woman, well, kind of about sisters, but not really, but kind of about this one woman who is married to this man. They live in a small town. I believe he is a factory worker, if I'm remembering correctly. And they have children. I think she just had like their 2nd or 3rd baby, or she's pregnant or something like that. And she is feeling kind of trapped in this character of wife and mother in her relationship, and she feels like she's, lost herself and lost her autonomy and freedom, and she doesn't know who she is anymore. She lost her ability to even grow up into an individual, because now she has to play this character of these 2 really important roles. Then she finds out her husband is having an affair, and it's really upsetting. I think the story is really upsetting. Again, it's like that haunting, slow kind of a read that has a feminist lean to it. I think that a lot of people could really, really like this one. I've never heard anybody else talk about it, and I think that this one could be beloved. Truly, I think this could be a beloved book. So I'd really, really recommend Les Femmes de Giles by Madeleine Bordeaux, translated by Faith Evans. This month, but all the time. And then next, so I think I'll do my 3 favorite first. There we go. So next we have Clarice Lispector's The Hour of the Star, which was translated from the Portuguese. Yeah, she's Brazilian, so translated from the Portuguese by Benjamin Moser. This is a super short novella. I believe it was like 80 pages. This took me such a long time, though, for the length, like relative to the length, to read when I first read this a few years ago. Holy cow, did I love this. This is hands down far and away my favorite Clarice Lispector book that I've ever read. I really like Clarice Lispector's writing style, but you do, I find, have to be in the mood for it. It's super stream of consciousness. It's very thinky. It's very philosophical, beautifully written, beautiful sentences. I think that if you're a girl that likes fiction about women's lives, kind of like interesting niche books like that, which I think there's a huge market for that, especially right now and in recent years there have been, and you haven't read Clarice Lispector yet, you absolutely have to. In this book we follow 2 characters, but our main focal point of this story is this girl who's, I believe, living somewhere in Brazil, and she is living in squalor pretty much. She has absolutely nothing at all, but she is like the happiest person ever. And it's actually, I don't know why I like almost started crying when I just said that. I think that I need to reread this book, absolutely, because that message is, I think, just absolutely the most important message that we could remind ourselves of in life, that it's not about what we have or what we're doing, it's truly about how we find contentment with ourselves in our life, and our reality is what we perceive our reality to be. And I think that's just absolutely so important. The other character is like a young boy who's viewing her that's like hates her, but is confused by her and is mad that she's so happy because she has nothing. And I think you see him like struggling in a general sense that normal people do, like wanting things out of life and wanting things. One of my favorite books of all time. And then we have Elena Ferrante's The Lost Daughter, which is translated, I believe, by Anne Goldstein, if I'm not mistaken, because I think she translates all of her books. Yeah, Anne Goldstein from the Italian. I'd recommend really anything by Elena Ferrante. I think she's kind of like the big name in books written by women translated into English. I'd say her and Han Kang, like I hear of the most. But if you haven't read any Elena Ferrante yet, I'd really recommend truly any of her books. This is just absolutely my favorite, and it's super short, quick. The movie with Olivia Colman is outstanding. Holy cow, do I love that movie. Such an amazing, faithful adaptation. In this book, we're following this woman who's about middle-aged. She has 2 grown daughters that are, I think, like mid-20s. She lives in Italy, but she goes on vacation to like a beach in Italy. And we see her there sitting on the beach, and she observes this family, this big, boisterous Italian family who's also there on vacation. And she really fixates on, she has lots of interactions with this family, but she really fixates on this one young mother who has a young, maybe like 2-year-old daughter who has this doll, which is significant in the story. And we see just the way our main character observes this young mother. And I think the way that she's comparing her body and what she's gone through in life to this other woman, but it's not expressly stated. There's lots of imagery in this of like rotting fruit and aging and perhaps missed potentials of who you could be. But really lots of imagery. The imagery that stuck out the most to me was the imagery of like aging and rotting and how we live inside of these bodies that decay. You know what I mean? Like as we get older. And I think it's like a physical representation of obviously time passing, but with time passing, like missed opportunities or versions of yourself, like I said, that you could have been. Yeah, it has kind of like a lusty undertone to me in this book too. It's kind of like grimy and lusty, but also like a deep but airy look at womanhood, and I absolutely love this. So I'd say these 3, hands down, God tier, favorite books of all time. I totally recommend these. I totally recommend these. This book called Bonjour, Stace, which I read last year, actually about a year ago, for the first time. This is translated from the French by Irene Ashe. And this book, again, super short, was written by Françoise Sagan when she was 18. Excuse yourself. When she was 18, and it's about this young girl who's living in this like fancy summer home right on the beach with her father, and she's like a teenager, but she's getting older. Her mother died, I think, when she was young, or her mother's not in the picture. And she has like a really close relationship with her father. On the back, and I think a lot of people historically have read this as like a Oedipus complex kind of a story. So a girl who's really possessive of her father and just like kind of wants to keep him to herself. I didn't get that in this really at all. I read this more so as like, well, something else that I should say about the plot. We see over the course of this summer, this girl, her dad dates a lot of women, and she doesn't really take any of them seriously. He's not taking them seriously either. He just dates a lot of women and treats them, like gives them lots of stuff, kind of a thing. And this one woman comes into the picture in this story who's like a serious, like, I feel bad saying respectable because I wouldn't want to imply that the other women weren't, but you know what I mean, like more mature, respectable, serious, intelligent, and beautiful woman who comes into her father's life, and they get engaged, and it's about how our main character is sort of dealing with that. She kind of tries to sabotage the relationship a little bit, but to me it really read like a girl's refusal to grow up almost. And like she sees this other woman, now she finally has like a proper female influence in her life, and we see her kind of rejecting her, but also you see her admiring her too, like privately admiring her. We see her rejecting her, but it feels like she's rejecting growing up. Like she does not want to grow up. More layered and complicated than that, but I'd say that's what I took from this book, and I think that it's a really fantastic read, and I'd really recommend it if you haven't read it yet. Another Italian translated book, and I believe this was also translated by Anne Goldstein, and this is called A Girl Returned by Donatella di Petrantonio. This was interesting, but I loved this. Totally gives Elena Ferrante vibes, like absolutely. So if you like Elena Ferrante and you've read a lot of her books and you want something different but similar, this. It's giving the Neapolitan Quartet a bit. Just like, I just get the same energy as, like the same energy from this book as I do from Elena Ferrante books. We follow our main character, who's a young girl who was born to a mother that didn't have a lot of money but had a lot of kids. And so our young girl was sent to live with her mother's sister, so her aunt, and be her only child. So it kind of helped her mom like out financially. And I think that it gave the aunt a child too, you know? And our main character and her aunt, or her mom, that's her mom, you know? She raised her. She doesn't know this other woman who birthed her, and she doesn't know her siblings. She has such a beautiful bond with her aunt, but then as she gets older, she does get sent to live with her birth mother again and her siblings. And it's about how her brothers treat her, which was really kind of unsettling and uncomfortable, about how her other sister treats her, just about like a class dynamic, about socioeconomic differences, which was super fascinating, and about her different relationships with these two women who she sees as like both mothers, but different mothers in her life. And I think this is just a great coming of age story. Again, a lot about the socioeconomic differences, about family, about mother-daughter relationships, and about self-identity. So I'd really recommend this if that sounds interesting to you. And then we have this book called Woman at Point Zero by Nawal El Sadawi, which was translated by Sharif Hatada. And this book is like a very heavy story about a woman who, I believe we start with a reporter who's going to talk to this woman who's living in a Cairo prison cell. And the reporter, she has like, the girl in the prison cell is up for the death penalty. She was born to a peasant family. She was very mistreated by the men in her life, and she is a really powerful go-getter female character, like a really strong female character, but she lives in this society where there are not many or any opportunities open for women. And so she kind of goes, she does what she can. She does what she can. Is that proper verbiage? Anyways, she does what she can to make money for herself, which puts her in difficult and unsafe and interesting situations, which has led her to be in this prison cell. And I think that this is just a really gritty, powerful, intense feminist story about this woman who does what she can for herself in the society that she's in. And if that sounds interesting to you, totally would recommend this, but it is pretty heavy, so just keep that in mind going into it. Cassandra by Krista Wolf, which is, I believe, translated from the German by Jan van Hurk. And this is kind of a stream of consciousness, beautifully written retelling of Cassandra's story. So Cassandra is the daughter, or one of the daughters, of King Priam, who was the king of Troy. And after the fall of Troy, so after the Trojan War, she is taken back to Mycenae. Yeah, Mycenae. I almost want to say Mycenae, but I think it's Mycenae, by Agamemnon, and she becomes Agamemnon's slave, basically. She also, before the Trojan War, was cursed by Apollo to have these prophetic visions, but that no one will ever believe. So this is just Cassandra is a fascinating character, and I think this is a super necessary, very stream of consciousness retelling that I would super recommend if you're interested in her as a character. The Lady and the Little Fox Fur by Violet Leduc, which I believe is also translated from the French by Derek Coltman. Super short. Loved this. This is about a woman who's late in her life. She's an older woman, and you see her kind of going about her day-to-day life. She is also in an aging, decaying, withering body, as we all are, but she's in a later stage of that. We see just how she moves through the day. She has this little fox fur that I don't forget what it's called. I almost want to call it like a little shawl thing that she wears that like kind of makes her feel more special and cooler and beautiful and more alive, I guess you could say. And we see her moving through the city. We see her sitting on, is it the subway or the tube or the metro, whatever it's called there. And she sees like a young, attractive boy that she's observing, and she's like, wow, he's gorgeous. And we see her seeing him observe her, but like not observe her. And she talks a lot about how getting older makes you feel invisible, and it does make you invisible in her story. And I just think this is a really interesting reading experience about womanhood in like later in life. Yeah. That's that. My last recommendations of books that I just absolutely loved that are both translated. Oh, you know what? This one's a bit of a stretch, okay? But not really, because this was first written by, I don't know who originally wrote this. I don't know if it's attributed to anybody, but this was translated into the modern English by a woman. So I'm thinking this counts, okay? I'm deciding this counts. And that is Beowulf by Maria Devana Headley, or translated into modern English by Maria Devana Headley. I haven't read any other translation of Beowulf. I do have the J.R.R. Tolkien translation that I hope to read one day, but this just blew my socks off when I read this. Absolutely, like, this is giving the same energy that Hamilton is kind of giving to me in some ways. And I think that the way that she translated this old English text in verse was just so skillful and just so cool and really powerful and intelligent. So if you want to read Beowulf, I don't know, I think this is a stretch for Women in Translation Month, but I think it counts, right? I think it counts. There you go. Just a little bonus, I guess. And then another little bonus. So this is not fiction, this is nonfiction, and I very, very, very recently read this last month. I think it's for a very particular audience, but that is War and the Iliad by Simone Weil and Rachel Beaolf, which is translated from the French by Mary McCarthy. So this is a collection of essays that these two women wrote during World War II. There are these two Jewish women living in France during World War II. They wrote essays about the Iliad. These women were both like contemporaries of one another and of Simone de Beauvoir. They were philosophy students. If you are interested in the Iliad and want to read some essays kind of discussing them, lots of comparing to, well, specifically in Rachel Beaolf's essay, there was a lot of comparisons to Tolstoy, so Anna Karenina and War and Peace. If you're interested in something like this, I just thought I'd put it out there and say that I absolutely loved it. And it is written by women and translated also by a woman, so that's a bonus. But yes, so that is my list of recommendations for Women in Translation Month. Please let me know if you're interested in any of these books, if you've read any of these books. I'm also super open to recommendations. I do have a decent amount of books on my TBR. for Women in Translation Month already, but I'm always open to recommendations, and I think a lot of people would enjoy seeing those in the comments either way. Yeah, I hope you found something here that was interesting to you. Just let me know what you're thinking. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.